Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, as usual. I'm joined by my co-host, Keith Glasser. Keith, how we doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. Excited. I know you are as well. We got a special guest this week. I'm going to pass it over to you for the introduction. Really looking forward to talking with this guy today. I think he's going to bring a ton of insight for all the listeners.
Yeah. Tonight we have a longtime friend of mine, a former competitor in the Liberty League with my when I was coaching there, but a rock solid dude who's been around college baseball for a very long time. He's really good at his job from a recruiting standpoint, from a coaching standpoint. The last 2 years, 3-4 years actually, I think at this point, like they're tops in the Liberty League. They won the regular season this year. They were in a regional last year. But tonight we have the University of Rochester head coach Joe Reina. Joe, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, I appreciate it, guys. Great to see you guys, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're excited. We not every day do we get another head ball coach on here to start breaking some stuff down when we kind of get into the recruiting and the just the kind of the questions that need to be answered and the information that people actually need to know versus just I think I know what I'm doing and you actually have no idea. So it's fun to actually be able to sit here and talk baseball with baseball people and get people the information they need. But before we get going, what we do with everyone is just kind of give us an overview of a 30,000 view of how you've gotten to where you are today before we kind of jump into all these questions.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Rochester, New York. Was fortunate enough to then go to St. Bonaventure University. Made it the team as a walk-on. Things didn't work out. Went back to a local junior college here at Monroe Community College. Played there 2 years. Was an All-American my sophomore year before I then headed down to Long Island University, the Brooklyn campus. Played for Coach Giannone there for 2 years in the Northeastern Conference. And then really was kind of at a point where I didn't know what I wanted to do. There was independent ball options. Wasn't sure that was really the route for me. But, then talked to my former coaches at Monroe Community College and asked them, hey, any interest in having a younger guy on staff? And I had some interest in possibly getting into coaching. And they said, sure. They agreed to it. Was there for a couple of years before I then moved on to the College of New Jersey to get my graduate degree as a grad assistant under Rick Dell, who gave me a ton of responsibilities at a very young age, between making the schedule, directing the recruiting efforts, taking over the infield and hitting portions of the program. And I enjoyed it immensely. And then, as you guys know, once I finished my degree, trying to get in the door of coaching was a challenge. I had done a couple of years in the summer leagues and New York Collegiate League as a head coach. At the end of my time at TCNJ, I was fortunate enough to get asked to go up to the Cape for a summer to run an offense with Spencer Graham, who I still believe is a scout in the business. So it was, you got a lot of different irons in the fire at a young age, and you're trying to really navigate, okay, what's the next move, which can be a challenge. And during that time, I got a phone call from our softball coach in New Jersey saying, hey, I think the University of Rochester is looking for a head baseball coach. And she goes, you grew up there, right? I said, yeah. And she said, they're going to make it into a full-time job. I said, great. Put my paperwork in and got a phone call and did the interview process. And, 22 years later, I'm still here. So I'd like to think we're doing something right. But yeah, that's kind of how I got here.
It's a road that I think a lot of guys who've been in the business know that it's not always that straightforward. And um, I mean, obviously, you've learned from a lot of different people along the way, and you've been a head coach for 22 years now. And I think you know, you, to build Rochester into the program it is today, I think speaks to you as a coach, you as a person. And I know, me and Keith both have a ton of respect for what you built up there. I had to take our ass whoopings from you when I was at Vassar, and we were always trying to close that gap on you guys, trying to figure out like, well, how do we beat Rochester? So, looking forward to getting some additional insight here. The first question I'm going to throw at you, Joe, and I think this will be an interesting conversation for everybody who's listening because of the caliber of school that Rochester is and the level of play that you need to have from a player in order to continue to build that program into, what I assume you aspire to be is to make that College World Series appearance. What does the process of player identification look like for you? Not only from like the evaluation piece, but also I know obviously the academic piece, the financial piece, those are big pieces of the puzzle for you. So I'd love for you to take a few minutes and kind of talk us through what it looks like through your eyes from a recruiting perspective.
Yeah, a great question. And I don't know if there's really, one. It's a multitude of things that you're trying to put together. Obviously, the academic piece is big, and each year that I've been at Rochester, it seems like the class strength in general continues to grow and grow, and we're trying to keep up with that as well. We have a really good relationship with our admissions people, who that has changed immensely and has given us a ton of success. Not because it's getting easier to get kids in. That's not the case at all. But their communication with us early on in the process, meaning, we're currently looking at our 24 class right now, and we have transcripts in, and we are getting those over to admissions now. So that helps. It's important to know who you can go after, just as important it is to know who you can't go after. You don't want to spend time chasing kids that or following kids around that admissions is going to say no to in the end. So we try to get that done early. The financial piece is another big piece. Having conversations with families, saying this is the sticker price. You need to be comfortable with it. If you need if a financial aid package or merit money, and it's a big piece to making your decision, this probably won't be the place, because that's just the school we are. But take those pieces out, and now we get to the player itself. We want a physical, athletic young man. That's what we want. A guy that we don't carry a big roster at Rochester. That's by design. I want kids that can play multiple spots, that are going to allow us to run, bunt, play the small game. Yet we can hit doubles in the gap and leave the yard if we need to. That's really what we're trying to get. And we've got some tremendous programs within our region in New York State. And there's one that has been the benchmark for, I think, every other school in the New York region. So we play them every year, and that's you kind of see the bodies they have and style of play they have. And that's really what we're trying to continue to keep up with and build, so it reflects the same as theirs. Now, is it a bigger challenge for us? 100%. But we also are allowed to go into the homes of young men from Southern California, from Houston, Texas, from Chicago, from Miami, where that program can't do that. So, that's an advantage for Rochester. We're able to show, hey, this is what our players are doing 5 years out of college. They're successful attorneys. They're in premier medical schools. they're working on Wall Street. Those are the things that we can, that help close our case with some of these families.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention, you guys got a beautiful facility. The campus is fantastic. Yeah, it's a really cool place. And if you're an academic kid and an academic family who's listening to this, like, you need to go do a little bit of research. It's a pretty cool place to play, and the product you guys put out on the field is fantastic. I mean, we've had a couple draft guys in the last few years, if I'm not mistaken, Joe.
Yep, yep, we have, and hopefully, might get a few more in the next coming. So, but yeah, the facilities, that's another piece, Andy, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there's, I think kids, when they go around campuses, especially in the summertime, with their parents, take a look around. This is the time of year when colleges do major construction on their campuses. And if you're on a college campus and you don't see construction, that should be a little bit of a warning sign for you as a family, in the health of the institution. We're all reading the newspaper these days about schools closing, cutting back. In Rochester, that's not the fact. We went through a full renovation in 2012, redid the turf in 2021, and just put another $2.34 million into our backstop and grandstand area to finish it off. So, the institution has put their money where their mouth is, in the fact that they're stating that athletics is woven deep into the educational experience at Rochester.
I
Yeah, you
think the
certainly
other
don't
thing,
get that everywhere.
and the other thing too, it's not just Rochester. I think there's a lot of schools out there that can do this, but I mean, speaking from experience and of playing in the league, like there's a certain level of care that Rochester has from an athletic department standpoint, which I don't, not everybody has that in college athletics or in Division III, and I think that's a unique thing that you guys have there, that like you can walk on campus, and aside from the the construction you see, like everything there from an athletic standpoint is nice, and they compete and everything. So like there's a certain level of care where you're like, all right, like the student athlete is being taken care of here, and they're doing things the right way for these kids, and it's paying off in the long run. And I think that's something that people don't know how to look at or address in the recruiting process, but it's easily seen, I think, if you look at a department as a whole, right? Like not just the
Yeah.
you're gonna have programs that are like that are gonna be outliers that are really good at schools that they might not otherwise care, But I think when you see athletic departments that are successful across multiple sports, across multiple genders, it's like, all right, something's going on here where they care about what's going on athletically.
I would agree.
The next question I'm going to lob at you here, and I have a little bit of an idea, but it's something we ask everybody who does come on here. What do you find to be the steepest learning curve for incoming freshmen when they get to campus?
I think it's a couple of things. I think it is being at a Division III institution. There's this misconception that Division III baseball is easy. There is a misconception that, playing time is to be expected as a freshman. And I think both could not be further from the reality. The speed of the game is noticeable. The physicality of Division III baseball at a high level is noticeable. If you have a hole in your swing, it's exploited. If you struggle to locate a certain pitch, it's exploited. There are some differences between Division I and Division III, and I think we all realize that. But the gap is ever closing with the difference in level of play. And I've seen it in the last 5 years for sure. I've seen it even close quicker in the last two with the transfer portal and opportunities that are now given, that the NCAA has given to the student athletes. So I think incoming kids to Rochester, I think the physicality and speed of the game is really the big thing, along with the keeping up the academic piece in the spring season. Those are probably the three that I would say jump out at me right away.
Yeah, I think the academic piece is always a worry of mine, but the physicality that has come over the last, probably, I mean, I agree, the last 2 years, but even the last 5, 6 years, I mean, it was our RPI for 10. Like, it's a completely different game than what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that there's, you're right. You fight the stigma that it's like 13th grade, and we've talked about on this before, like there's levels within the levels, right? Like everyone knows there's Division II. Well, they should know that, like, they're like, you throw Millersville into subpar Division I team, like Millersville is going to roll them. They're a really good baseball team. And same, like, there's really good Division III schools that are going to would be able to compete. And I think at what people don't understand is how good the baseball is at the Division III level. And it's easy to see. Like, you just go watch a game. I mean, if you live here in Rochester, like, you have Rochester, you have RIT, you have Fisher. I mean, there's three really good teams right there. You have Brockport, in the last 4 years, or the last 2 years, 3 of those 4 have made a regional. Like, go watch it. It's high level, really good baseball.
I mean, I think if you turn on the NCAA regionals, or if you follow Division I baseball, you're seeing the byproduct of that. I mean, Boston College, they have a Salve Regina guy and a Babson guy throwing significant innings on a top 25 team in the country. And I just turned on the Mason game the other day against Wake Forest, and they're throwing a kid from Clark. Like, those kind of kids, by the time they become juniors and seniors, they have the ability to compete at a really high level of any college baseball. But the question I would ask you, Joe, is transfer portals obviously had effect on a lot of different things. And one of the things that me and Keith have talked about is that there's a trickle down, and there's a few other reasons that it's happened and why college baseball is so darn good right now. But one of the trickle down effects is this transfer portal. Do you feel that, and no knock on a lot of the really good players that I watched you coach like 8 or 10 years ago, but like, do you feel like that bar for your program has gone up because you have access to some kids that might throw a little bit harder or run a little bit faster? Like, is that something that you're seeing all recruiting?
Yeah, I think that's a question. That's a very fair question, and one that I get a lot on the road and talk with families. And the reality for Rochester is we don't really shop in the portal. That's not. I think if there's kids that academically want what we have to offer, then 100% I would take a look, as I would 10 years ago, at a kid that wanted to transfer in. But I'm not seeking going in the portal trying to find those guys. And maybe that's wrong. I'm comfortable with, building a program and a team with, and the way that we've done it in years past. I enjoy that. I love practice, is probably one of my favorite times. But I think that the portal piece is tricky. We've had some graduate transfer portal guys that have come in and played and have done a great job. But when you're talking about a roster of 32 guys, I love the development of the freshman to sophomore to junior to senior. Like, that's, and that could be wrong of me. I mean, maybe that's why we're getting to the regional and not advancing any further. I don't know. That's just what you get at Rochester. And I think our admissions people and our administration wants that as well. That's what they want it to look like.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I got to imagine for you, a big part of it is the development piece. The guys do continue to get better. And when
Yeah.
they come in as freshmen, they get in with the culture, they get in with your philosophies, and they start to develop as they get going. And sometimes
The,
that 1 year plug in can be difficult.
to me, Andy, the culture is king. That has, I get coaches that ask, okay, Joe, what's been the secret over the last 5, 6, 8 years? And I got to tell you, it's obviously the caliber of player, but it's the culture that these guys have established. Um, and I tell them every year, like, hey, this is your guys' team. I'm just the bus driver, right? I just get behind the wheel. You guys tell me where you want to go. And they've really taken taken a liking to the fact that, culture is important. They want a good culture. They think it wins. The proof's in the pudding. It has won. I believe it will continue to win. And it's built around unselfish guys that want to make the guy behind them, in front of them, and each side of them better. And I know that's a unicorn in today's day and age, and I respect that, and I'm not going to monkey with it at all.
Yeah, you shouldn't. Don't fix what's not broken.
Yeah.
Would you say? I guess just following off Andy's question real quick, which I think I found this to be a little bit true, but without notwithstanding the transfer portal, because same thing when I was at RPI, I'm not really in there. But do you think with how competitive the transfer portal has become at other levels and other schools, that you're able to find better players that fit what it is that you're looking for at Rochester because other people aren't recruiting those kids? They're going into the portal. Or would
Yeah.
you say, or is it the same as it's been?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are better kids. It takes longer to say, commit them. Because listen, I have 2 high school age baseball players in my household, and they're watching the NCAAs and they're like, I could play there. I could play there. I could play there. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of kids can, but if, Tim Corbin's not calling you, you can't play there. So I do think there's better players that are available to us that are more open to what Rochester has to say and what I have to say. But at the same time, what other people are doing, I can't worry about because it's hard enough here at Rochester. So I just really focus in on what we do well. And that's really, allowing the guys to take what they want to take. Be a neuroscience if you want to be, be a Wall Street guru if you want to be, and play high level baseball, have a good time, be around me for 6 months. Hopefully we're winning and it's enjoyable. But that's what I want for our guys.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think we spend a lot of time talking about like the physical evaluation, right? And everybody likes different stuff. And, I know you like guys who can run and are athletic, and it's always been a big part of what you've done really well there. But what I would be more interested in hearing from you is what are some of the character traits? What are some of the less physical things that you're looking at throughout the evaluation process for a kid that either gets you to like, yeah, that's the guy, or hey, I don't know if that kid's quite a fit?
So, interaction, right? Face to face interaction. Can a kid look at me eyeball to eyeball, understand and appreciate what I'm explaining to him about the academic piece at Rochester? How does the young man interact with his family? Does he introduce me to his parents, or do I have to do it? Are you an introverted, extroverted? You guys both know me. I'm an extrovert through and through. And if you are too much of an introvert, it's it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a struggle in our program because I want those kids. Watching in a game, if you strike out, what do you act like when you come back to the bench? You're on the mound, you get a big strikeout. I want to see some emotion, but it's positive emotion. It's not woofing at the other team. Like that stuff doesn't really play for me, but I want to see that positive emotion. If your teammate makes a great catch, how jacked up do you get? When he's coming off the field, like those are the pieces that I want to see because I also, at the end of the day, you guys know this, baseball at this level can be hard and humbling. Do you have fun playing? Right? Because most of these guys, they're going to med school, they're going to Wall Street. We have a few guys that are able to collect a check playing it. But you got 4 years, man, and that window gets shorter. You guys all know this. It gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And I want guys that have fun at practice, have fun playing, and really just, are great teammates.
The fun thing's it's such an interesting concept that I think people associate fun and they don't realize that you can be tough and you can work hard and you can compete and that can all encompass fun. And it's funny that you bring that up as like a key piece of the puzzle because it took me a little longer to figure it out. But when I got to William and Mary and got around some guys who were definitely going to play professionally, one of the things that really stuck out to me is that if the kid doesn't enjoy showing up every day, it's over. Right? They have to enjoy the hard stuff. They have to enjoy the commitment to the team. They have to enjoy the practice. They have to enjoy the bad days. They have to enjoy the good days. They have to enjoy the travel. They have to enjoy all of it because the moment that becomes pulling teeth to get them to be there, when the kid is the kid who only shows up for practice, it's hard to come back from that. And I think it's because it goes back to that one word, fun. Like if it's fun and you enjoy it, all the hard stuff is okay. And you can push through it because you're going to fail. You're going to have a moment where things do not go your way. But if you enjoy it, you come back to it.
Yeah. Listen, we have, I work with the pitchers and we'll have guys that come down to throw pens. The pens are just awful. Right. And I know that this guy's, a neuroscience and bio double major. And I know it's the, mid-April when it's all breaking loose for him. And I'll just back him right off the mound and be like, hey, man, like, that's terrible. And I hope you don't get mad at me for telling you that. But, I've just got to be honest with you. And he'll turn around and be like, I know. I'm like, all right, well, are you mad at me? He's like, no. I was like, good, because if you're operating on me someday, I don't want you switching my wires in my brain, making me talk a little different or act a little goofy, and it just loosens them up, right? It just loosens them up. And I'm like, all right, man, let's go execute the next 10 pitches. And you'd be amazed at just how much more relaxed they are. And then it's like, he gets done with those 10 and he turns around. I'm like, man, that's elite. He goes, yep. I go, it ain't that serious, brother. And you just gotta because stats don't say. I know we're a game on numbers, but stats are what they are. You're never going to change them. You could piece 10 balls in a row, be 0 for 10. I'm still putting you in the lineup,
Right?
Because you just smashed 10 balls. So, and I think in a younger generation, and listen, I see it because I coach youth baseball as well. People are so connected on the stats, and it's put way too much stock in it. And I think that is something that drives these kids from not enjoying it because they're just driven by that black and white number set that's put on a piece of paper or on a screen. I think it's wrong.
Yeah. We've had discussions on this before, and I think the stat thing is it's a fickle beast because this game is far too hard, and we used to have this conversation. I used to have this conversation with hitters all the time. Like, you can only control your swing. You have no control over anything after you get that swing off. Like, you could absolutely barrel a baseball right back through the middle if the shortstop, ranges glove side, dives and throws you out. Like, you have no control over that. You could also shatter your bat and end up with a double, which is, that's why this game is stupid sometimes. But to your point, like, I think a lot of people put so much stock in their stats and not necessarily, that it starts to diminish their love for the game and showing up because they're so results driven. And I think that it's hard sometimes to really, like, yes, the stats are like you can manipulate them how you want, but it makes it a little bit hard. If you're only worried about your stats, like, you're not going to enjoy actually playing the game. You're not going to compete. You're really just worried about what your numbers look like. And that's never really going to be a recipe for success long term.
No, I don't think it ever has been.
No.
Right.
When you get into for when you're recruiting guys, are there any specific, well, let's call it position players, are there any specific metrics you look at specifically for, like, the floor of what it is that you want in your program of guys that you're going to recruit? Or is it more of a, they pass the eyeball test and then we're going to kind of go from there and see what fits my coaching style?
No, I think, we play on turf. So I love guys that run. The 60 time is something that I do look at. I do pay attention to. I love to get home to first times, especially in games. Pop time from a catcher. I think if you can stay in that 2.0 pop, that works for us. Because I think things can get sped up. The pitching metrics. I think I've been around long enough and talked to enough guys to know that if an arm works, an arm works. I don't know enough about the spin rate and how all that stuff plays. At our level, I think at Division III, there's still Division III baseball players. Hitters always get themselves out. That's been true as long as the game's been played. But those are really the main metrics position wise is really, 60 home to first and pop times.
So you don't evaluate a hitter solely based on his exit velo that he took in a batting cage with nobody trying to get him out?
No, I mean, listen, you can watch a swing and know if it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, those things, I was always for in-game, for position guys, like how they take an at bat always really clued me in. Like, what does the take look like? Can they get to velocity without clearly having to guess, right? Is there some athleticism in the swing? Because I don't know, for me, coaching, it wasn't so much about the mechanics. And I know we've got all these Twitter gurus and like some of that stuff's crazy valuable. And like, yeah, you do need to have a good swing in order to be a good hitter usually. But I thought that one of the biggest things that kids needed to be taught when they got to college, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on this, is how to actually take an at bat, right? Like being able to understand where that guy's throwing from. Like, can you pick up the window? Like, what are you going to identify? Are you going to identify as glove hand? Because glove hand ball is usually going to follow. Or are you going to pick up a slot? What's his tempo like? How is that going to affect how you get into position? And then you start getting into what does that guy do well, right? If he can't throw the ball arm side, well, let's eliminate that from what we're looking at. Let's adjust our eyes appropriately. Like, well, he's throwing 10 breaking balls today, and he hasn't thrown one for a glove strike. like those are the things that I thought made a huge difference for guys, specifically when I was at William and Mary, because the mental piece is usually what allowed them to get their best swing off.
Well, and you bring up a great point, and when I work with the youth program that I work with, we spend a ton of time on approach and timing and how do we get that? How do we do it? When I go recruit kids, I love it when they get 2 strikes on him because I want to see if he has a 2-strike approach. Because you'd be surprised how many of them don't change a thing. And when the ones that do, I'm like, yep, I'm circling that kid's name because he's got an idea of what he's doing. And we can kind of fix some of the mechanical stuff, but man, that mental piece, that's as good as gold.
I think the other thing that gets lost on people is that high school baseball and college baseball are not the same.
Right.
High school baseball, like if you get a couple really good hitters, they can kind of just make it go. Like they're going to hit a double and you'll score some runs, you'll do that kind of stuff. But in college, you really are a piece of an offense. And the goal is to score runs. Like everybody loves hits, right? And we stick with batting average. But actually, it's interesting that we're getting to this. But Bobby Tewksbury had a really interesting tweet the other day. And if you guys don't follow him on Twitter, he's a pretty good follow. Bobby does some really good stuff. But he had a tweet about comparing teams in their batting averages. And you would see teams with like the same batting average, but one team would have scored 100 more runs over the course of the season. And it gets down to the point of the goal is to score runs. In college baseball, you talk about the 2-strike approach. Getting a ball in play with 2 strikes may not win you every game, but it might win you a game because you get on first base and then you're able to maybe steal second, and then a guy pokes one through and you end up scoring a run. In taking that team first 2-strike approach, being able to move a runner, having feel for where the infield is with a guy on third, like those are the things that I don't think they get taught as much as they should at the high school level. But they win you games and they make seasons at the college level. And for me, it was a little frustrating that a lot of that information had to get passed on to kids who were really talented and they didn't understand some of the significance of things like that on a small scale.
Well, and we talk about approaches at the plate. Same could be said for base running. You watch high school kids, you're watching guys that, we've got a kid coming in that I went and watched played, and he's got some terrific physical, gifts, especially on the baseball field. But I watched him go from first and score in 5 pitches. He didn't steal 1 base. He's reading balls down, reading balls off the bat. Ball gets blocked. It's close, but it's just, it squirts, to the right 10 feet. He's got a great secondary walking lead down third base. He scores no problem. When I watch that, I'm like, man, that's a guy that can come play for me, because you just can't teach those things. That you can drill it to try to get the actions and get the instincts, but that, man, if you, like, as soon as I saw that kid, I was like he'll score a ton of runs for us. It has always come back, well, Joe, he's kind of small physical wise. I go, doesn't matter, man. He's strong as can be, and that kid will score runs for us, and a lot. So
sounds like an old friend of ours, Mr. Blaine Fouquet. It just seemed like he was always doing something to win you a baseball game.
No doubt.
Move a runner,
No doubt.
ball always going to the right spot. Like there's something to be said about that. And when you get to college, those are the things that matter, right? Like those little things. And I'm glad that you're highlighting it as a big piece of the puzzle of what you do from an evaluation perspective and how you build your teams. Because, I mean, a lot of times those things add up significantly over the course of a season.
Yeah.
we got next to your coach class? Let me go through my list again. Got off track there for a second.
You start talking base running. There, you can. There's a lot to be said about it. Nobody knows how to base run anymore, and it's maddening. You got to continually teach it.
It's just high school coaches, and I love them because I have to love them. But I think you're the 2-hour time in practice. It's a hard 2 hours. Once that clock reaches 120 minutes, I feel like that's one of the things that just goes untapped in some of these kids.
And I think the other piece of it too, and I agree, is that you have, I think from a high school standpoint, like the vast majority, the best player on every high school team is likely going to play in college. Like there's a lot of kids that aren't actually going to play college baseball. And, I don't know how many people actually I think people put the time in to do it, but what does that time look like? Is it quality time, or is it just like, hey, everyone go stand at first and I'm going to stand over here, I'm going to wheel you and you go first and third. And it's what it is. And there's no, I think sometimes you can say that you covered it, but one, how serious are we taking it? What do the reps look like? And what are we actually doing there? I mean, I know when growing up for me, we didn't run the bases at all. It was a pretty steep learning curve for me. When I got to college, they were like, how long is your lead? I'm like, I don't know. Take a couple steps, stand here. And it was like, nope, that's not what this is going to be. And it was like, wow, okay, there's a lot more that goes. I didn't know, Joe, I'll never forget day 2 of the fall. One, I didn't know what a double cut was. So I couldn't get that right to save my life. And then I couldn't get the sign straight. And Andy's just screaming at from shortstop to figure it out. And I'm behind the plate and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be figuring out. I don't, this game is so fast. I don't know what is happening right now. And I'm just getting berated by everyone.
Yeah.
This is a nightmare. What am I
doing? In the fall, we always tell our guys, anything you're on first base, anything not hit directly at an outfielder, you are to go first to third without stopping. You are not looking. And the guys that are so afraid to make a mistake that I start to yell at them for standing at second base.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, we're never going to know if you can do it until you start doing it.
Right.
And we had, a really good center fielder who could run a little bit. And it was the same thing. I would tell him, I don't care where the ball is hit. If it's a base hit, you're at first, you go to third. I don't care. You get thrown out, that's on me.
Right.
He's like, what? I go, you are not stopping. Head down and go. And he runs a 6.2 60.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you got to roll. And he got pretty good at it, but it took him a little bit because he was just deathly afraid of making a mistake and getting thrown out. And I was like, we'll live with it.
Right.
We'll live with it.
And there's the context around it too. And this is the other thing that when we would talk about it is, one, practice is the place to fail. There's no consequences. We're playing an inter squad, get thrown out at third. I won't.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. I told you to do it. The other thing that I think can get lost in the shuffle too is that most outfielders, even the really good throwers, it's hard to throw a ball 180 feet, give the third baseman the proper hop to tag a runner out. That's a sequence of events that is a difficult thing to happen. And in most cases, you see it in college baseball, a lot of coaches, they won't even, we had a stop sign at third base. We didn't have a wheel sign. If you were on second base, I'm not wheeling you. You're supposed to score. I'll stop you if something weird happens back here where you can't score. And we won games like that. Guys scoring from second base on a ground ball to the second baseman that gets muffed just a little bit because we had practiced that. And it was part of what we did, that when there's 2 outs and you're on second base, you do not slow down at all. You do not slow down until the umpire calls that guy out in the third out's called. And we won multiple games like that. Just a little muff, or the guy gets pulled off of first base, and that dude's all pissed off because he thinks he stayed on the bag. Well, we just scored a run. And it doesn't matter until it matters. But when it happens, everybody gets it. Like the one time you go first to third, and that's the reason you win a game, everybody goes, "Oh, that's what coach was talking about. That's why it matters."
And Andy, you talked about scoring runs and doing the little things and scoring runs in bunches off of not getting a lot of hits. And that's one of the ways you do it. It's that first to third play where it's 50-50 at third. He's safe. But guess what? The guy that just hit the ball backfills into second. And now we have second and third with no outs. And we can go fly ball, ground ball, and we've just scored 2 runs.
Yeah.
You that's
score 2 runs with 2 outs.
Right. And that's what, some of these better teams in our region, when you watch them play and when we travel the country and start to get into some of the elite teams and elite baseball programs in Division III, you sit and watch it and you're like, okay, that's what we got to do. That's what we got to work on. We got to get better at that. We do that pretty well. And then our guys start to see, well, we execute that way better than they do. And they're number 1 in the country. It's like, yeah, we're not that far away.
No, it's interesting. I think that a lot of those things go untalked about, but like it also goes into the what you got to learn when you get on campus.
Yeah.
Right. Like those are things that, I had to figure out pretty quickly what a double cut was. I didn't know. And then I apparently had to figure out just everything because I was just getting screamed at by my co-host to figure it out. So
he can be demanding.
But there's light at the end of the tunnel because now we do this together, so we're still friends. You brought up earlier.
He's probably texting you, figure it out right now.
You brought up earlier that, culture's king in your program, and I've seen it. Obviously we played against each other, and I've seen it. What are those character traits? Just you don't have to give them all, but like, what are some of the character traits you value in the recruiting process that like, all right, like if this kid's tough, or if this kid is, that fit into what is going to work for you. That you know what I mean? Like they're going to get in and like it's going to be a seamless transition for them into your culture.
I think any sign of selfless behavior. When you guys were coaching, you do the overnight visits, and I would make sure that whoever we brought on campus met with at least 5 to 10 of our guys. And I pulled all those guys in at some point during the week going, you guys really like them? And I would play it off like I didn't really care for them. Right? I'd be like, man, I don't know about this kid. And I would just listen to what our players would say. If you got kids going, Coach, what are you talking about, man? No way, this cat gets it. Like, he'd be pretty good. Then you got a no-brainer. Then it's like, all right, this is one we're going to really push hard for. Or if you got the kid that was like, he just thinks he's better than really what he is, which every kid does.
Right.
I mean, you kind of want that. Mm-hmm. But then when it trickled into selfish behaviors, then we knew that this wouldn't work. This isn't going to be a good fit. I love personalities. Keith, you coach against our team for a while. We've got some great ones. Mm-hmm. Kid that just graduated, Joe Rendy, he was a guy that could command the room. Yep, he could command the room. And I knew that day one when he came to campus, he could command it. He was a shortstop. He needed to command it. The shortstop's a position I played. So I would drill on him. Man, it was tough for him as a freshman. But he his teammates watched him get chewed out from time to time, and he still kept coming back. And at the end of the year, heck, against your game, he made 2 of the best plays I've seen a shortstop make ever at our level. So that's I think the more selfless behaviors I see and our players see, that's a huge sign for us.
I think it's a huge thing, right? Like the more it creates more headaches in the long run, but I think it's also, it's vital that you actually have a handful of players in on the process when you bring them on campus, because they're like, it's super hard to be able to kind of get a bunch of kids on campus who have never met. If they've never met any of the kids that incoming, it's a weird fall. There's a super weird dynamic. Everyone's trying to figure it out. And I saw it after COVID, right? Like, you couldn't have anyone come, and then they show up, and it's like, who are these kids? Like, we've never met them before. We've never hung out with them, and it took a lot longer to kind of like get that feel into the program. Whereas, previously it was like, yeah, well, everyone's come and visited. They've met 5, 6, 7, 8 guys.
Yeah.
And they have they have previous relationships with the guys coming in. And you feel a little bit more comfortable about it. And I think by and large it's worked out. But it was, I think that's something that is underutilized, but also like vital from a coaching standpoint of like, you want to make sure that the kids you're bringing in are getting the, I don't want to say the okay, but like you're getting the nod from some of the kids of like, hey, like I think he's going to fit in here really well. Like seems like a rock solid dude. Like we want him.
It's vital for us as coaches, but it's vital for the families and the student athlete that we're trying to recruit, right? Like I always tell them, you can ask me anything. I'm fully transparent. I'm going to give you the honest answer. And the same questions you're asking me, I expect you to ask our players.
Right.
And the answers better match up, whether you're at Rochester or any other school. Because if the answers don't match, you're not in a place that you probably want to be at.
Correct.
And with my 2 kids, it's the same process, right? It's, hey, ask these questions. If you're getting different answers from different sides, then you're probably not at a place you want to be at or you're going to be happy at.
On the flip side of that, and you kind of already answered it, but I think this is an important thing, because I think it's just important to touch on the good as it is to highlight some things not to do. When you get a chance to meet a kid in a family, or maybe we can even take it back to the evaluation process and then talk about what the interaction looks like when you get on campus. But what are some red flags when you're evaluating a player from a physical perspective in terms of what you see on the field? Maybe it's effort, whatever that might be. And then what are some red flags with the interactions that you have with kids and their parents that may not be the reason that you go in a different direction, but might give you a little bit of pause?
I would say on the field, red flags for me are on and off the field. I'm watching body language. I'm watching how you go about your business, because you'll never know that I'm there. I hardly ever wear anything that says Rochester on it. I get behind the backstop once in a while, but generally I kind of meander around the field. So I watch that a lot. That is a big piece of the puzzle for me. I think when I'm interacting with families, when the parents dominate the discussion, that concerns me. When the young man's in my office and can't speak for himself, that's a flag. That's a massive red flag. Because while I am recruiting the family and the player, this young man's going to spend 4 years with me, and he needs to tell me what he does well, what he's got to work on. If he has a problem, if he needs help, he's the one that needs to come in my office or call me or text me, not mom and dad. Like, this is, and I understand parents are afraid, they're nervous. I'm one, I get it. I'm going through it with my sons now. Like, I am 100% there with you, but it's their journey. I've already taken it as a student athlete. I know how much fun I had. I know what it did in my life. They need to do this. We talk about, they got to drive the bus. I think everyone's heard that. And that's true. If a kid's struggling in class, he needs to come to my office and say, Coach, I need help. Yeah, no problem, man. We can get it for you. Like because I want him to know how easy it is to get that help for that class. Just as it is, Coach, man, I'm struggling on these breaking balls. All right, man. Like we can go figure it out. We'll go hit the cage and we can figure it out. It's not life and death. Like help is there. Our community at Rochester, it's full of people that want to see the students succeed. But the students sometimes don't see that and understand that. And I'm trying to get them to go that route. So I would say, parents, I know you got questions, ask the academic questions. Absolutely. Ask the safety questions on campus. Absolutely. Ask, does my son room with another baseball player? 100%. Like, Coach, how long are you planning on being there or here at this school? Very good question. But when it comes to a lot of the other ones, the student athletes got to ask that.
I think that's a fantastic piece of advice to all the parents that are listening out there that like to. And I'm not a father yet. Keith is newly minted. And Joe, you've been a dad for a while now, so I can't speak from that perspective. But I got to imagine that it's hard to not want to do that. But if you're a parent, like take Coach Reina's advice and stick to the parent questions, the finances, the academic support, and let your sons be the ones who are getting recruited. I think it'll go a long way, not only for them as an individual, but I think it leaves a good mark with coaches. I think the three of us, I think other coaches that we've had on the podcast so far, I think that's one very common response is when the parents dominate the conversation, it always gives me pause.
No question.
I always had the when it was when it came to like baseball stuff, like we think this or we think that. And it's like, well, guess whose name's not going to be in the lineup? Yours, Dad. So, but you're right. Like I think I think it's a little
guy
bit
you weigh
different.
450 pounds. You ain't ran in 16 years, man.
No. But like,
Sorry, can we edit that out?
I don't think. Yes, we can.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
But I don't think I think it's a little bit. I think it's a little bit more unique at a Rochester and an RPI, a place like that, because of the price tag. And I think sometimes you feel like that conversation can get a little bit dominated because of the amount of financial aid questions and things like that. But I felt like as I got older, I kind of figured out that it was, a little bit more of a, as long as I heard more baseball stuff from the young man that was looking to come play versus, sometimes it was only like 3 or 4 questions and they got their answer and I liked the kid and it worked out, and then it ends up being a 45-minute conversation on finances and stuff, which is fine. Cause it was $80,000 plus to go to RPI, which is absurd, but
yeah.
That's where we're at.
Yeah.
I guess we'll wrap it up here. Before you leave, Andy, do you have anything you want to add? Any questions you have? Burning questions? Ask Coach.
Well, I may be jumping the gun with what you're going to ask, but
go ahead.
I think this is always an interesting thing to close out with, and it's particularly interesting given that you have 2 sons who are going through this now. But if you're going to give some advice to players that they could use to help them in the recruiting process, what would be 1 or 2 little nuggets that you would say, hey, like here's some stuff that you need to think about, or here's some stuff you need to consider as you go through this process?
So it's a great question because it's I just had a conversation with my 16-year-old the other day about it when he mentioned a few schools. And I had said to him, all right, number one, academically, what kind of options do they have academically, right? It's got to really fit what you're looking for. I said, but number two, you grew up on the campus of the University of Rochester. You grew up playing and practicing and throwing the ball in our indoor field house that has 3 cages. You grew up on an AstroTurf field with lights. These are the places you grew up playing on. And you got to look at schools that offer those facilities to you. Because that's become innate in what you do. Right? Like you're a baseball rat. You want to hit every day, you want to take ground balls every day. You can do that with turf and lights. These 2 schools that you're interested in that have reached out don't have either. And their indoor facility is a gym. So how happy are you going to be when you can't go do what you just did? And his response was, how many places have what you have? And I go, that's for you to figure it out and do your research and do your homework. And it goes back to what I said before. I've already lived this journey, right? This is yours. If it's really important to you, you'll do the research. Everything is online. You can find it all. They all post pretty pictures on everything. You can do the research online and figure it out. And he kind of took a pause and was like, yeah, you're kind of right. I go, yeah, you want to improve your game. You want to go to a place that has facilities that are open, that you can do that you're not restricted in its use, that you share it with another team, or it's 25 minutes off campus. Those things are important because, hey, listen, you might love the school and that's great, but how are you going to do if you don't have an on-campus facility? I told him, I go, you wouldn't do well with that. So I think, and the last piece is, and I always tell the kids that I coach in the summer that are, in our program, you want someone that you're going to send your son to, that you would trust to raise your son if you were no longer around him. Period. As a parent, I take that, that's a job I take extremely, extremely serious. I've had those tough decisions and conversations with players when they're going through some really tough times and trying to give them, that sage advice we're all looking for. But as a parent, I want to make sure that that's where my sons are. That they're playing for 2 guys like you guys, that I would trust you. If something were to happen to me, they could lean on you guys. That's really, and people may say, well, that sounds pretty serious, but hey, we've all been there and dealt with kids that have lost a loved one that they've relied on. And who do they lean on? Baseball coaches, the guys that they're around every day. So I think that's what I would leave people with.
I think the one thing too, and thank you for saying that. That's very nice. The amount of time that if you're a parent, that you have to understand, the amount of time that your son is going to be spending with their baseball coaches is way more than you have that you can really fathom right now before them actually going through a full season, right? Like the amount of time that you're going to spend on the baseball field, in the dugout, on buses, in hotels, all that stuff during the season, it is hours upon hours upon hours. And if you for, to the recruiting end of it, like if you don't get along with that person, like it might not end well. But like you want to be with somebody who is going, like you get along with and you trust, and you do have that, trust that if, this person that they're going to spend a ton of time with is going to be the right person for them, that they're going to actually get them to be better. And I think that that's something like I strive to be that guy when I was coaching, and we're doing that now is like, when we're working with families and trying to like get that through to people, like, hey, you're going to want to go play for somebody who actually cares, who's not only a really good coach, but they're a really good person too.
Yeah.
And trying to get that through to families, because there's no, like, the amount of time, just sheer time that you spend with your kids is like pales in comparison to a lot of other things. Like this is a game, and it's a, you say this, it's a lifestyle, right? Like it's not really a career. It's not really like, this is a lifestyle that you lead, that like it affords us the opportunity to do a lot of different things that otherwise people don't do in 9 to 5 jobs, but it takes up a lot of your time. And
Yeah.
you enjoy it because when you surround yourself with really good kids that want to get better and are really good at what they do, it makes your job rewarding. And that's where, those are the coaches that you want your kids to go play for.
100%.
And at the end of the day, this is a business, right? Like you're gonna have some people that aren't gonna be there when you get there, or they might leave halfway through. But like the guys that, like, you could go there, and the guy that is gonna leave is gonna put so much thought into that process that it's like, it's killing me to leave, but it's better for my family. And like
Yeah.
that guy is the guy that you want your kids playing for.
Yep.
Hey, I've been here for 2 years. I'm just gonna go to this job and make more money because I can.
Yeah.
And there's a difference there, and right or wrong, but like that's just my personal feeling
Yep.
on that.
Yeah, playing for somebody who is going to give you what you need and not what you want all the time. Right, like hold you accountable. Love it when you need to be loved, challenge you when you need to be challenged because it's the right thing to do. Like those are the kind of guys that I want to see our guys that we help go play for. Right, it's not about he's not going to give you what you want because you think you earned it. Like you're going to have to earn it. But when you come out the backside of a program that's run by a really good human being, you're going to figure out how good of a player you can be because they're going to coach you up. And you're going to walk out of the backside of it a better person because you're going to get held accountable. You're going to get loved when you need to get loved. Right? Like you're going to get challenged when you need to get challenged. And those are the lessons that I think are hard to quantify when you have the experience of being a college athlete, especially if you can find yourself in an environment where you made the right choice. Is those lessons are the ones that get you where you want to go when you get done with school. Those
Yeah.
are the things that allow kids to persevere through, tough times, or, when things don't go their way, because it's inevitable. Those lessons you learn from a coach who cares, from a coach who's invested in you. He's also invested in the team. Like, those are the guys we want to see our guys go play for. And I think if you're a parent, you want to make sure that you're checking that box for your son, right? Like it shouldn't be easy for him all the time because it's not going to be easy for him all the time. And you get coaches who throw out a lot of promises, and I can promise you that when push comes to shove, they're not going to uphold them if it doesn't mean that you're the right guy for the certain situation. And that was always a red flag for me whenever I would hear kids, we were recruiting guys, and they'd be like, "Yeah, well, so and so says I'll start as a freshman." I'd be like, "Okay." Like, I get that. Like he's telling you what you want to hear. Like that's a red flag
Yeah.
for me. A little off topic, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, any other closing remarks, Joe?
Oh, I think what you guys are doing is great. I think it's needed. I think in this day and age, and I don't foresee it getting any better as I'm kind of going through this with my 16-year-old. It's tough. It's challenging. But I think having, got two guys that, we're in the business, know it, have a ton of connections, in all different levels. I think it's great what you guys are doing. So appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh,
I don't
thank
know-
you.
I don't know what to do
Really
with my hands
appreciate it,
anymore.
Joe.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
No, thanks so much. I know taking time out of your day and with your kids and getting ramped up for what is the inevitable summer chaos. Really appreciate you taking a few minutes and sitting down and sharing some knowledge to the masses.
Awesome.